Still says offline. I think we're good to go. All right, we're good to go. All right, guys, welcome to the very first episode of SMM Talk, where we have a very interesting topic today, something that's been going around Twitter for a while now, especially over the past 12 months. And Charles, I think, you and I have definitely gone back and forth on Twitter about this topic and how to earn respect as a social media heavy hitter. We're using that term. Yes. And also how to earn a seat at the table. A lot of frustrations have been going out within the social community, and people have become a lot more vocal about that. And I'm very excited to speak about that more today with our guests, Allie and Jack and Adrian. But yeah, I think this is definitely a major topic, and it's time that we bring it, more to the forefront.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's what we're here to do. That's why I'm so excited that we're doing this and to have people participating and watching, because I think, at the end of the day, like we've talked about this, like when one of us wins, we all win, because this is something the industry at large needs to kind of push forward. It needs to identify how to provide those solutions. And so that's what we're hopefully here to do, and have a good, fun discussion with some really, really dope heavy hitters.
Absolutely. So we'll be kicking it off tonight with Social Allie, best known on Twitter. And also I have the pleasure of working with her directly at Digitas, doing some awesome stuff there. What is going on, Allie? How are you?
Hey, guys. I can't decide if I should say guys or y'all. But
I like
hi.
Y'all.
You like y'all? I'm from Charlotte originally, so I feel like I'm allowed.
Yeah. I'm feeling the y'all. That's what's up. Loving that.
Sick.
Well, Allie, we I think a lot of us obviously follow you, and you're one of the biggest voices, in my opinion, when it comes to social, especially on Twitter. So it's an honor to have you on along with our other guests. So love to get a quick little background of your your journey into social. How'd you get started?
Okay, so I did not know that I wanted to be in social media to begin with. I wanted to be an art director. And I learned very quickly that though I can do like some finagling in Photoshop and Illustrator and all that stuff, is not my number one skill. And I learned that pretty quickly. So when I graduated, I moved up here to Boston, where I live now. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I graduated in 2008 at the height of the financial crisis, of course, like peak millennial. And so I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I ended up working at a baby store, kind of doing everything marketing for them. And I fell in love with social media because obviously at that point, mommy blogging was huge. There was only like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. There were no like paid ads in social. It was just like this ball that was going to be formed, this clay ball that was going to be formed into this, what it is today. And I found that I was really good at figuring out how to do things contextually in these spaces that were really interesting. And so maybe I wasn't the best at like illustrating or graphic design, but I could figure out something that would be really awesome in a space. And so that's sort of how I decided social was going to be my path. And from then I went and did my master's, and I went and worked at a really small advertising agency in the south end of Boston for a few years. I went and worked in PR for a year, which wasn't really my thing, but it was interesting because it really gave me a view at using social media to reach influencers and journalists and policymakers. And that's always a really interesting thing to think about. Social isn't just consumers, right? And then I landed at Digitas, where I lead up our social strategy practice. So I've been at Digitas for about 6 years.
No, that's awesome. It's so interesting to hear your journey. Is like social was not your initial target whatsoever, and I feel like a lot of us kind of fall in that.
Well, you couldn't learn it.
Exactly.
Yeah, you couldn't. It wasn't something like people learned at the time. Now there's like classes and courses and all this kind of stuff you can do. But at the time, it was like this new thing that not really many people knew about, but knew was kind of neat.
Right. And I think, We all know this, but social changes so quickly. The landscape is moving so fast, and that leads to different challenges, different issues that you have within the job as a leader, as someone who's being managed. What would you say so far have been your biggest challenges, issues, or frustrations within the social space?
Well, first I'll start with something that wasn't a frustration, and then I'll lead into it, because there's one thing that I think is really frustrating for people as they get into social today that wasn't really hard for me. And it's just because when I first started out, I could just say, oh, it's the algorithm. And people would listen. And so like I had a little bit more leeway starting out because no one really knew about social. And so like I was the expert just because I lived and breathed it, where today so many more people think that they're an expert in the space just because they have a presence or a handle. And so I think the frustrations that many people have today are very different from the ones that I had starting out, which was just explaining like why social was even a thing. Mm-hmm. Now, at least people know almost everyone uses social media. Almost everyone uses like 3 or 5 different social platforms, right? Like we're not at a place anymore where no one knows what social media is. Like New York Times has a beat all about social media. When I was in it, no one really knew why it was important. It didn't have the saturation it has today. And so just like explaining why it was important at all was probably my hardest hurdle. And at that time, I was thrown into rooms with really high up people and I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this are in that same situation still today, which it boggles my mind. But I was thrown in as like someone who was in social media for a year or two, talking to CMOs and talking to like leaders of large corporations, just because I was the only one who knew anything about the space. So that was probably the hardest, just like kind of going into the room and explaining even why social was a thing to begin with.
Yeah. I think that's a really well said. I mean, I think, and that's why I wanted to harp on that point that like social moves so fast. And so the challenges that you face are not something that people who are coming in will face. So everyone's challenge is different. I think it's important to kind of recognize that for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I love that about it, that it's always changing.
Mm-hmm. That's what makes it fun. That's what makes it fun, right?
Yeah.
So with that, I think, going on the main topic of tonight, how to earn respect, when you're coming into something that, it's a profession that to the general public, almost anyone can do, right? You get a lot of people that come in and say, hey, like, my grandson had this awesome video on his Instagram. Let's use that on our brand page. So, obviously, when we run into those situations, we're kind of looking for respect, right? So what are some things that you did in your career, Allie, that, you were able to earn the respect of, the people that you were working with?
Sure. So, well, first, one thing I think is a little bit different in today's world is the idea of earning respect. I think like when I started out, it was very clear, like you needed to earn it. Like you needed to hustle and you needed to like get, really try to get the position or the position you're in, like, and talk to people. And I think now today we've changed to a place where like you are in this role and so you should be respected. Right. And that I hope is happening, but it's really hard in the social media community, to your point, Anthony, because it doesn't, everyone thinks that everyone can do social media. So I think that's a big thing to start out. But the other is have a freaking opinion, have a point of view. So many people come in and like, even when I'm hiring people, and can spit out stats that they read from an article, can tell me like all the changes that are happening. And I want someone who can see past that and who is telling me like what they care about and what they think is going to happen and why it's important. That's uniquely theirs. And that's how you get respect. Well, that's one of the main ways I think you get respect, is by just having an opinion and not being afraid to give it, and not being afraid for it to be wrong. Like I almost love someone who's like, you know what, Allie, I think Vine is going to be the next Facebook. And if someone had said that to me, like in Vine's heyday, I might have been like, I'm not sure that's going to be right. But I would have loved that they had that perspective if they could back it up and really had like a point of view behind it and data behind it, versus someone just kind of spitting out, well, Instagram's the best, or, well, TikTok is rocking it. You know what I mean? So that's
100%.
it. Have a
100%. And you kind of mentioned something else was, kind of using data and kind of having numbers to kind of back up, whatever strategy or ideas you bring to the table. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like how important is that, and how can maybe some younger and even maybe some seasoned social media professionals, use that as more ammo to earn that respect?
So, okay. Data is hard because you can find statistics anywhere and they can often be wrong. And first of all, find sources that you trust, and that the people you're talking to trust. So that is a big thing. Like, I'm not going to go into talk to a CMO and give them a stat that I found from like Statista.com. Like, it's going to be from Pew Internet Research. It's going to be from some of the big, like, Business Insight. It's going to be from a big reputable source. I'm going to use that pronunciation from now on.
I like it.
Yeah, I like it. So 1, make sure you have a good source. 2, you don't have to know the exact numbers. You just have to know the approximation. Like, just knowing it's a third, or it's 3 to 5, or, around where it is helpful. So many people focus so much on the actual stat itself and forget about what the foundation of it is, like what the point of the story is. And so I think that's a major thing. The third is, do not use the same stat over and over and over again, because I'm telling you, it's going to change. That 3 to 5 platform thing.
Yeah.
I heard that maybe 2 years ago, and I still use that, and I shouldn't. I think it's still pretty right. But I think it maybe has gone up a little bit. But my point is, always be changing them out, and know that things change at quite a speed. And the thing is, the people that you're talking to will likely not know much, but they know the questions to ask. So, you can start to learn what the executives at your company care a lot about, and
right.
tailor the data that you're kind of citing often based off of that.
It's interesting you put it that way, because I think I tweeted the other day, like, sometimes half of the battle is kind of understanding the personalities that you're working with, and knowing
over half.
Yeah, it's sometimes it becomes more of your job than anything else. So yeah, just a little bit on that. Can you expand, like, how important is it to develop a relationship and truly understand your manager and the team that you're working with?
Okay, this is my number one. Well, okay, I'm going to say there's 5 million number one things that are important, but it is super important to know your audience and know what they care about. I have a client that I work with, and let's just call them A company. And they literally, if you could give them 1 million stats, but if you say that B company, their competitor, is doing it, they want to do it. Like, that's the way in. It doesn't matter. Like, that's all they care about. So I could do all of this work explaining the rationale behind it, or I could just be like, company B isn't doing it yet, or company B just did it. And like, that's my way in. And you just have to get to know the people you're working with, because they all have little idiosyncrasies that they've learned over time. Like, especially these people who are in CMO type positions or in like huge leadership positions, who probably started out, like, they started their careers out as leader. Like, when they were leading this industry, social was just beginning, right? So they like still see it as this like little tiny thing, when in reality it's so much bigger. And you have to like just know their little things that are gonna like set them off. And by the way you do that is by talking to other people. Like, you can't go to them and be like, what's your thing? You have to just like talk to the people that surround them. And probably half of my job, I would say, is just shooting the shit with different people and learning kind of how they tick and how they think, and being bold about setting up meetings with people that you'd be surprised at people who will just be willing to talk to you if you just put time on their calendar, and be pragmatic about how you bring things up, like use the conversation and be like, yeah, I've been really trying to get in with so-and-so, but I can't really understand. I don't really get what makes her tick. Like, what's the thing? And you might learn, like, man, do not use a table. If you use a table, the woman's not going to get it. Like, you really got to, like, things like that you would never understand just set people off and can change the whole trajectory of your career.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely love that. I think you just dropped like a huge wealth of knowledge in what you said. And what stuck out to me, and I want to go a little off script to go back to something you said. So there's two things. Number one is, like, obviously develop a point of view, have something to say, and then learn how to read the room, learn who you're talking to. Could you actually talk about or give some advice on how to build a proper or develop your own point of view to bring to the table? And then how do you learn how to read the room properly so you can add value while bringing your point of view, but in a way that is respectful to whoever you're talking to?
Writing. So in critical thinking, we all learn, no matter what level of education you have, at some point you've had to, like, read a book and figure out what's really going on in that book. And I think when we read articles, most people take things at face value. The difference is, when I read an article, I go through all of the different links and I think to myself, okay, like, is this thing they're saying really making sense? And I connect the things that are happening. So you're seeing, like, last week or the week before, Facebook came out with, like, their shop pay option. Same exact day, TikTok comes out with, like, some new commerce options, right? But they're being reported on completely different. You're seeing articles in TechCrunch about one, like an article on Mashable about the other, and no one's, like, combining the two. And the thing is, like, the more you can connect those dots and say, shit, something's going on with commerce, like, something is changing, what's the deal? And then you can start to, like, dig into those things. But I find that just, like, having either a daily or a weekly or a regular cadence of practicing writing and practicing critical thinking is the thing that helps you shape your point of view. And I teach a class, and I always force the class to create different types of point of view documents, whether it's a written blog, whether it's like a PowerPoint, whether it's just an outline, whether it's just like a speech, because those are all different ways of expressing your point of view. But the more you practice it, the better you'll be able to figure out, like, how you critically think about things, which is always different. Like, everyone has a different perspective.
Yeah, no, that, I think, again, like, you spoke on some really, really high level points that are important. So, like, as a quick, like, rundown, writing, developing that critical thinking skill, but also finding the gray areas in between so that you're able to link things that may be related at face value, but also may not be related, that ultimately can be relatable when you put it together in a critical thinking manner. So,
yep.
Yeah, I thought very well put together. And I have, like, one final question, and it's a little bit of a different topic, knowing that we have some other guests up to speak. But one thing I want to ask was just generally, like, if you weren't doing social media, if you weren't, like, a social media marketer, what would you be doing? Like, what does that life look like for you?
Okay, I have zero effing clue. Hold on. Maybe a dog walker. I love dogs. I something where I get to express my opinion, though. Like, I don't know if I would be a writer, but I definitely think, like, a blogger, or I don't know. At one point I wanted to be a sports journalist. I'm a huge Tar Heel, huge Jordan fan. Jordan's the GOAT. Yeah. I'm just going to say it. Please do not try
no doubt.
And get me. I know, Jack, you have different opinions. But I think maybe something like that. I'm not really 100% sure. I think I found like literally the perfect career. So I couldn't be happier.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think you took it. I actually grew up in North Carolina, so I feel what you're saying. Like I'm right there with you. So yeah, I mean, again, like that just speaks to the nature of this industry. I think with all that it brings, it's challenging, it's difficult, but like if you think about it, I couldn't see myself, you couldn't see yourself doing anything else, right? Like this is the thing.
This is it. This is my thing.
Awesome. And actually, I have one last question before we jump into our next guest, but something I want to ask everyone: where do you see social going in the next 5 to 10 years? Obviously, every year is different, and there's a lot going on. But if you had a crystal ball, what would you say would happen in the next 5, 10 years?
I think we're at an inflection point right now where we're seeing social media consumption increase, but the speculation of social media and its impact on people's mental health and wallets, frankly, like it's never been higher. I mean, you guys probably saw some of the conversations with Reddit and GameStop and Robinhood, all that was happening today. So I think there's definitely going to be more regulation coming. I think that we have seen, as so many different networks popped up, they were popping up because they were not stealing, they were getting more people into social media. So like, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all these different things had a different purpose because they were getting new users into social. Now you're starting to see all the platforms replicate themselves because they're trying to steal share from the other platforms. So it's kind of like a diamond. And I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see more consolidation happen in the space, or more like big platforms come around and kind of figure out a way to personalize someone's feed that takes a lot of their different networks into one place. Something like that then allows people to control their data a little bit more, and what they see a little bit better.
Gotcha. That's amazing. And as always, Allie, you have some amazing gems that you drop on us, and we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to jump in and chat.
Always.
Awesome. Well, we will definitely see you on Twitter very soon.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hey, man, as always, it's such a pleasure to talk with her, man. I think she always brings such great knowledge. And, if you're not following social_Allie on Twitter now, make sure you guys definitely do that. You will definitely learn so much. And excited to continue moving on. So up next, we have Jack Appleby, also known as Juicebox CA. And, I actually want to know a little bit more about where that username came from, dude. Like, if you could fill us in, that would be awesome.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny. It comes from basketball, which, like, yes, I totally caught Allie baiting me into talking about Team LeBron as the GOAT, which we don't talk about today. We got that talk today. The Juicebox thing came from a couple different places. So I played for a 500-person Christian college basketball team, like the smallest. Literally went to a school that didn't win a game the previous year because they'll give me scholarship money and I'll get playtime there. This sounds great. And my teammates somehow turned Jack Appleby into Jack Apple Juice into Juice. So it just became Juice for a long time. And I was doing what all of us do on social media, which is how can I find a handle that's available on every single network that's phonetically fun to hear, that people will remember. And my brother's nickname has always been Box, which I'll let him tell that story someday. So I just was looking for something fun, threw those together in the Juice Box. And then what's really common, I come from the Warped Tour scene. And it's really common for bands on social to throw their home state at the end of it instead of official or real or whatever else. And it just sounded fun to say. So Juicebox CA.
There you go. Now we know the history, man.
Yeah, exactly.
No more guessing. I couldn't even honestly take a wild guess, but dope to have that background. So yeah, let's jump into it. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into social, and kind of what you're doing now.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been working in social and social-related fields for over 10 years now. I've always been on the agency side until more recently. I work at Twitch as of the last couple months. Also got into social completely by accident. was going to school, like originally wanted to be a music journalist. Found out real quickly that I would never make a dime doing it. So like, what's a way that I can write or like be in business, I guess. And I had a business management like pursuit with a marketing concentration. And I didn't finish my degree. I ended up getting an interview through my college girlfriend's sister knew someone at a networking event who like, they weren't friends, like they're just acquaintances. And she's like, hey, like my sister's boyfriend doesn't know what he wants to do with his life, like, but he likes social media. Maybe you like would want to talk to him. And I ended up getting an actual formal interview over it. And she's like, hey, you don't know this, but those music websites that you've been writing for the last 5 years and like that little blog that you're holding up, you're doing social media campaigns. Just like, let me pay you to do them now. And that agency got bought by, a little tiny agency got bought by Eisenberg Group 4 months me into being there. And I was at Eisenberg Group. I was one of their original social media team members for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Which like an agency timeline, like 5 years, it seems like doesn't happen a whole lot. But I loved working there. Like it was a great job. I got to really cut my teeth in gaming, which was odd because I wasn't allowed to play video games growing up, like zero. So worked on a lot of gaming campaigns, led content for DC Comics game for the TV show Community, worked on some Microsoft work, worked on a Surface for them, and then just more video games that I can count before I started to get to a little bit more leadership positions. Went over to an agency called Laundry Service to work on Beats by Dre. Went back into gaming at an agency called Petrol, the agency that was the key art agency for Call of Duty, where I had to work with Bethesda and a bunch of amazing games. And since then, I've just kind of enjoyed like going to different jobs and trying different things until I kind of realized like when I laid off my last job, like would really like to go back into gaming and would really like to find a job where I can really focus on the work and not be a manager anymore. Like
Right.
really like diving deep on that part again.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting journey that you've had. And again, it's like pretty similar to what a lot of us have seen, where social was not the initial landing point. But one thing I think I wanted to kind of go back and have you explain a little bit more about was, obviously social wasn't the landing point initially, but you were inevitably developing skills that you have taken and translated into what you do. So can you talk a little bit about like what those skills you inevitably were creating and how it's important to focus on like building something for yourself to get and use when you get to a career that you actually enjoy?
Sure. It's funny. I actually think that process you just mentioned is kind of what set me up for success, in that I pull inspiration's too broad, but I pull thoughts from everything that I've touched and worked on. Like, so like during college, I worked for a music blog that's long gone called Absolute Punk, but it was a big deal in the Warped Tour scene, got like 1 million to 2 million viewers per month. And it was as much a community as a blog. So I've always been like a big community person. So I always wanted to interact with the users. So like I had this idea to run like a fantasy band draft where like we would take turns drafting band members and had all these rules, and we're going to do it like you would do like a basketball fantasy draft. And then we'd all discuss with each other like why we thought one band was better than the other. We made this fake point system. It was ridiculous. But that was just like, I was just always looking for ways to interact with other people and like just really talk about my interests. Mm-hmm. And that's what my whole first interview for my first job was about. She's like, I'm sorry, you did what? Like, yeah, that's a social media campaign. Like, come do that for brands. I think that's been a big part of like, it's really easy, I think, when you work in social to focus on your direct competitors. Like you work for a phone company, you're looking at the other phone company. You work for a pro sports team, you look at another team in your league. And more often than not, the references I'm pulling when I'm coming up with concepts aren't, half the time they're not even social media things. They're like more like content theory, like even like movie storytelling. And the other half, it's from an industry I've never been part of. Like I think an MBA social media manager has so much to offer an agency social media manager, who has so much to offer a social media manager of one who's maybe not getting like training from someone who works directly in social because they report to like a director of marketing. Like and that's been such a big part of Twitter for me. It's just constantly being exposed to all of these different types of people who are making all this amazing work, because there's no one way to do this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Really quick, I had one more kind of follow-up question. Something again you alluded to earlier, where I guess now in your career you want to focus more on the work, right, and not necessarily like managing and that in that aspect of things? I guess in your career so far, not that managing anyone has been a frustration or an issue that you've had to face, but are there any other things that you've seen that maybe sometimes get in the way of doing the best work that you think you can do?
Well, I think there's one really large structural and compensation challenge that exists in a lot of different places of work, which is to go get more money, you have to step into management roles. I think that's really tough because there's a lot of people who are really excellent at a skill set, whether it's social or something else, and management is just a whole different thing. And I've been in management roles many times now, and frankly, like I really enjoy being part of the work. And I'm at a stage of my life now, like part of this is being in pandemic, like being alone in my apartment. It's like when I was looking for my next job, the idea of managing someone over Zoom or trying to teach a junior over Zoom, like I don't know how to effectively do that. So I was really looking for like a solo contributor type of role, so I could focus on that. I'm lucky to have found one that like fit exactly what I wanted to do. But I think that's something I really hope to see change in agencies. And like I think it's more likely to change in an agency than in a brand because it's a little harder on the brand structure. But how can we think about the role of a director, maybe more from a trafficker role that allows us to have like wider pay bands for a social media strategist? Like I became a director. I pursued becoming a director for the first time because I wanted more money. Like I was just more interested in doing more senior work for more money. And I wasn't ready to manage someone yet. And I think it's tough that we expect people to manage people to get that extra cash.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's so well said. I mean, it's not a problem that I've really thought about, but that is one crux of the situation. I think you put very well. And I think just another quick follow-up is like, then if you want to push that part aside and think about like, as you've built your career, are there any things that you've seen that are issues that younger social media managers need to be aware of or need to develop skills to overcome that you were able to maneuver past?
I think this is an area where like I feel lucky that I'm just absolutely fascinated by this space. Like it's legit like my Twitter account, like that's fun for me. I love talking about this stuff. It doesn't feel like work. And I've always been very, very prepared with a lot of case studies. Like I tweet a lot of examples of how other brands are doing things, sometimes with commentary and sometimes with zero commentary, just like a bulleted list of what they're doing in that. And it wasn't even on purpose at first, but what it allowed me to do was I could walk into any meeting with this like huge, like binder of case studies basically in my head of how someone else was doing something out there. So whether I was like an accessory to the room, someone who's like very junior compared to my peers in there and was like the social media guy, or when I got more senior, it always became clear to people I worked with that like, Jack's probably got an example of something that either worked or didn't work in that. And I developed that reputation, not only with my peers, but with my clients, to where it'd be common for me to have clients like text me on the side, like, hey, did you see this kind of thing? Like, how do we do this stuff? Like, I had a client, I won't say which company, but I had a client that I pulled into an agency, like a major music company, where me and that guy had our Twitter DMs back and forth. It was just us chatting about marketing. And like, we don't even have a relationship besides that, but it just became fun for us to talk about. So I think that's something, and I think that's something anybody can do. Consume as much social media as is healthy for you. This is the hardest year to do this. And I don't encourage people to spend more time than they want to on social. But then just theorizing about that. If Ali mentioned this earlier, I think it's so important. If you're constantly theorizing like your opinions on something, you're gonna start thinking that way and be able to bring that into rooms. And then it's about making yourself comfortable speaking in those rooms.
Gotcha. You know, you hit on something before about, you know, moving up to the manager position to earn more money, which obviously I think a lot of people have that goal, right? You know, you build a career, you want to climb the ladder. And I think a lot of times maybe money's a motivator, but, you know, kind of sticking to our theme tonight of respect, would you say that as you climb the ladder, you earn more respect, you know, within your organization, or is there a possibility that there's a disconnect there? Like, what would you say about that?
I would say don't expect that a title is going to change how people treat you. Especially if you're working in a multifaceted organization and social is an element of that. If anything, I mean, this is one of the tough things about developing in a social media career path is Allie talks about this subject so eloquently all the time, where it's how much of your day in a management position in social you spend teaching other people or rubbing elbows or like making sure that people understand to bring you to meetings. So no, I don't think respect should respect come with the title. It should at least be like benefit of the doubt. There's a reason someone's a senior strategist. There's a reason someone's a director. Like this should matter. But I also think a really important like maturity moment for working in social is when you decide that it's not everyone else's job to understand what you do. Like part of your job is sharing with whether they're superiors or peers at other departments, showing them your value. Like, I wish it wasn't that way, but that's how it is. And if you have that mindset and you constantly approach from like, what is the next way I'm going to show them how, like, why my opinion matters, how I think we could adjust this kind of stuff. Like to me, that's when you can start accelerating your career.
Absolutely. And I think, from what we see within the community, a lot of people understand that, right? Like, you have to speak up, but what would you say kind of holds people back from speaking up and giving themselves that opportunity to earn that respect?
Man, I think there's a lot of things, and I think there's so much context to stuff. I mean, I'll say, I don't want to guess what other people are struggling with, but like, I'll say for myself, things I did was I fought for autonomy when it made sense. I asked for opportunities to lead projects, and that wasn't with people outside of my department. That was with my direct bosses. Or like I saw an initiative that was happening. I saw an opportunity that was happening, and going to my boss and saying like, hey, I'd like the chance to lead this. Here's kind of my vision for how to do this. Like, I'm wondering if I can have the main speaking role when I do this. I'm wondering if I can like develop the deck. I'm wondering like, can I take some meetings without you? And that was a huge help for me. And just going to my direct boss and being honest with them about like constantly wanting to pursue the opportunities. Like, well, I mentioned earlier, we need to have the attitude of it's our job to make people understand what we're trying to accomplish. I also think it's our job to make sure that our bosses know what we personally want to accomplish. And keep your managers honest. Like, tell them like, this is the job that I want. This is the type of compensation I want. This type of role I want. And you can be honest, we're like, I don't understand what these roles even do. Like, I think a common social question is like, I see lots of SMMs who envision themselves as CMOs. And one of my first questions back is like, do you really understand the CMO position? So I think that's where you can really like, feel free to talk to, like, keep your managers honest and ask them for the opportunities and keep asking them and have that resilience to keep asking them. Have them set you up with the other departments.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's super strong.
Yeah, 100%. And just really quick in closing, just to follow suit with the previous interview, where do you see the landscape going for social in the next 5 to 10 years? I'd be curious on your thoughts on that one.
Oh man, I mean, I was the guy who said there's no other major social networks going to pop up, and then TikTok popped up, and like popped up's an understatement. TikTok's colossal. I think it's going to be really interesting to see the difference between a social network that's focused on your own following, like your followers that you have built, versus social networks like TikTok, which is more about like, it's the best version of a discovery-based social media platform we have ever seen. Not even close. Nothing's even close to it. I'm very curious to see what that means for social media in general. Whether we'll see other social networks try to, because like this is where Reels is not the same as TikTok. Reels is a 15-second format that mimics TikTok content, but TikTok's got like, doesn't have a secret sauce. It has 15 secret sauces that are all incredible. Can anyone come close to that? I mean, other things that are like interesting, like I think the Spaces Clubhouse bit is fascinating. I think we're not talking nearly enough about there might be some false positives happening for those while we're all stuck indoors. I'm very curious to see what I think they're amazing. I really enjoyed both. I'm curious to see what the user base looks like when we're not all inside. And I'm also curious to see what it means on Twitter. My immediate reaction to Twitter Spaces was Twitter's got larger distribution. It's got all the users baked in there. This is going to go great. And then I think back to like one of my last major ad campaigns where I worked on a live concert series that was hosted largely on Twitter's live platform. And it's hard to get users to stop and do something on Twitter. So I think building that user habit in Twitter Spaces, where I come to Twitter to stay in Twitter to then have a deeper conversation, I'm very curious to see what that looks like.
Yeah, I agree, man. All of those are fantastic. I think we as a community will all for sure be looking at those things in the coming years and coming months, really, honestly. So yeah, thank you again, Jack. Like, appreciate the time. This conversation was great. Always a wealth of walking knowledge. So appreciate you dropping these gems, man.
Yeah, guys, appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. Another great session right there, huh? Like,
yeah,
looking at the chat section, people are just like, thank you so much for these gems. And I think, just real quick before we bring on Adrian, who pretty much prompted this entire discussion. And, hopefully I'm able to figure out how to use Twitch and bring her tweet up on the screen. But, it's great to be able to bring social professionals or heavy hitters, like we're calling them, together. I know it's only an hour and everyone's got super busy schedules, but, we all talk on Twitter pretty much all day, every day. But to put faces to names and hear voices and talk about these topics, I think that's what truly makes this community so great.
For sure. Absolutely, man. And I'll further that by just saying, like, again, like when one of us wins, we all win, because we're in this industry. It's hard enough trying to do it alone. So we need to lean on each other, get the gems, get the knowledge, and continue to push things forward where we can.
Could not agree more. So we're going to bring in Adrian. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, everybody.
How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you guys?
We are doing good. We're so happy to have you on.
What's up? The inspiration. Good.
Good. So just want to make sure, can you hear us clearly?
Yes.
Okay, great. Awesome. So obviously, you've seen kind of like the flow of the show and their conversations, tonight. So we'll just jump right into it. Just, a little background about yourself and your experience with social media.
Yeah. So, hey, everybody. I have been in social media, maybe over 12 years now. Like everybody in the panel, I think I'll just be frank. I did not know social media was a profession because at the time there was literally only Facebook. And so on college campus, we knew, don't put a flyer up, post a picture on Facebook, or create, like, I think this was even before like there were pages, and just like create a thing, for people to call. And so, like Allie, I graduated during the Great Recession. And so I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was a women's studies English major. And so there was this panel, like, English major, you need a job that's not writing or not journalism or law school, come here. So I was like, this sounds great. So I went, and it was about public relations, which I wasn't really familiar with. And one woman, gave me a chance despite not knowing. And so at this time, I decided I really wanted to do PR, but PR marketing, and I know it's a beef, who owns social media, which I have my opinions on. So at this junction, PR is a part of social media, but none of the PR people actually want to do social media. So I was the intern running social media programs that I probably should not have. Because they're like, look, kid, here you go. And so my first Twitter campaign was for like a charity celebrity golf tournament. I didn't know what Twitter was. And this is the time where it's flying. Like, it's not like the slow, you see the same 30, like it's zooming. And I have no idea what all this, like what RT is. I think you might have even had to manually retweet. It was crazy. And so I, my boss is explaining like, strangers talk to you here. And I'm just like, why would you talk to a stranger? And so it's just such a new phenomenon to me. So I'm tweeting like about this golf tournament, and she's like, things can go viral here. So I'm like, okay. So I tweet, and I'm just sitting at my computer, like waiting for it to go viral. It did not. And I learned more about Twitter from there. And I just like fell in love. And at this time, there's no Black Twitter. there's literally, I'm at Spelman College, no one knows what Twitter is. But by that fall, everybody was on Twitter. So that's how fast everything moved. And so I still couldn't get a job because of recession. So I went to grad school to get my master in communication. And so while I was there, I was learning a lot of not technical things, maybe like more behavior change, elements of communication, how people process information. But of course, there was also like applied classes in social media. And so some of the teachers were from like Ogilvy, like VPs of Ogilvy. And I'm just like, wow. And so I learned about how vocal Black women are on social media, but I hadn't really seen brands really do this. So I pitched this woman who was unknown named Issa Rae to tell her she needed to do a virtual watch party with Black women because they will talk about this show while they watch it. And, you know, it'll spread. And so I pitched her cold, don't hear anything back. 3 days before her YouTube The Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl was about to air, she's like, hey, let's do this. So I'm like, okay. So we're doing like guerrilla marketing on Facebook, just posting come, you know, all this stuff, little clips of the YouTube. And we had this thing, because you guys have to remember, video is not a thing. Like video is like, you really have to make an effort to upload something to YouTube. So having creators, new concept. Second, how do you do a watch party? There's no way to really share a video like that yet, not at the same time. And so we still weren't able to do that, but there was this like little platform called Watch Party TV, which is like defunct. And so I pitched them to essentially become the host for this. So they put up a little awkward Black girl next to like Project Runway, all this stuff. We're like, okay, we'll have some room. So we basically, all the people who donated to her show, because she needed to raise $20,000 to keep doing it. All the donors, we invited to the show. And then we had contests and games to get in the rooms. And the trick was we aired the episode a day early and dropped it into this platform. So it wasn't perfect. We couldn't all watch at the same time, but kind of similar. And you can do reactions. So it was so popular. Oh, and then Issa would answer your questions. And so people loved it. We had a great time. We crashed the site, got threatened to be sued, because then on Twitter, everyone's like, we broke Watch Party. And they're like, you cannot say you broke Watch Party. So it's like threatened to be sued. And it was the most watched episode at the time. I think it was 30,000 views, and she had only had 10,000 at that time. And it raised the 30,000 she needed. Wow. And it didn't even occur to me at that time that this is to raise money. I just thought this is a fun thing for her to do. So I worked with her for the first season and part of the second. And then I got like a real job because it was tough. I wasn't exactly sure how to leverage my experience to sustain myself as a freelancer. So I worked 9 to 5s, all that stuff. But now I freelance VV May Labs, and I do social media strategy, largely analytics, which I'll explain, you know, to this conversation, so I could get a seat at the table. And so, yeah, I work with B2B, B2C, ed tech, software as a service. It's really the art of communicating to people and reaching goals. And I like reading all the time. So I don't have like, I have to do X. It's just, and I feel with each industry, you can learn something from the other. So that would be me and how I got here.
Wow, that story. I mean, I love Issa. Like that's awesome. And there's something that I want to go back really quickly and have you explain a little bit more about, which is shooting your shot, right? Like you don't know this person, you have no connection to them. This was an idea that you had by connecting dots. And you shot your shot. So can you speak like to what gave you the courage to do that and why you thought that was important to do?
I wish I could say I had something. I was broke and had nothing to lose. I wanted a shot in social media and no one would give it to me, and I knew I could do it. So I was just like, okay, these agencies won't hire me, F it. And actually it's the best thing that happened to me, because I think if I had gone the traditional route, I wouldn't have had some of the experiences that I had. I did, with the recession, there were less jobs. So if there were 4 spots for internship, there was 1. And yes, I say internship because during that time, a BA was required for an internship. So I was tired of being number 2. So I created a blog. I wanted to call it I Heart Social Media DC. I was in DC. I had to handle social media DC. So I looked more important than I was. And people wanted to talk to social media DC. And so they saw this little 22-year-old Black girl like, oh, hi. And so I'm like, hi, it's me. So we just, I would pitch anybody, anything. And I actually need to get back to that because I feel like the benefits of being young is you do not know better. So I did not. And she also, looking at it now, it's right. Up until maybe 4 years ago, that went on my resume and no one cared. Because this, like now at this point, it was 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess a quick follow-up, and everything you said makes 100% sense. Like, but as a follow-up, I think across the board with the people that we've had on this panel, they've talked about the importance of having something that you're working on, right? Like either writing or you started a blog, like you did something yourself for yourself to market yourself in a way. So can you talk about the importance of doing just that? Like you blog to just get your ideas out there. Why was that important to you? And how do you see that playing in especially people who are coming up in the ranks and trying to be, where you are?
Yeah. So I think social media people, and actually anybody, needs options. So one of the biggest mistakes I made was really putting too much stake in getting a traditional job and not really looking at what I had created and appreciated and taking it further. But what Oprah says, when you know better, you do better. And so I just think, though, when you have a presence, and I'm not saying you need to be a full-time freelancer or anything like that, but it makes it so much easier if you're like in a really bad job, which I've been in, and people are in your DM like, can you please help me with X, or can I hire you for Y? It makes it a lot easier to tell that boss, politely get off my back, however the police way to do it, because I can get another job. I can get a client to tide me over until I get that next job. So I say a brand really gives you options because especially working over 10 years in any profession, I think you see like employment's not as stable as you think. Like look at how many people who thought in February they would have a job and in March they don't have a job. Because of COVID. Nothing is guaranteed, not anything. So I think it's necessary, but I don't think you have to be an influencer, like posting 100 times a day, writing a blog. I think that's the thing that I've been working on of what's the impact that I want to have. And, what are things I like to do? And what are the things that are going to give me the most high yield of an impact? So for me, it's Twitter, because I love being on it. And doing little blogs or videos. And so I'm actually going to be doing a newsletter actually around this topic. So I'll post that after here so that we can talk about all of these things. It's really multiple ways to do it, whether it's different skills, branding, taking your shot. There's a lot of things. How much? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm seeing questions, but I'm like, I don't know if I'm supposed to answer them. So I'll go back to you.
That's all good. No, and I think you dropped a lot of great gems so far. And I think something that really stuck out to me, especially, from a personal situation, but employment is not stable, and you couldn't be more true with that. So what would you say with considering how unstable employment is or can be, having that respect, of your manager and of leadership, how important is to have that respect amongst that team, considering the environment that's out there right now?
I say it's really important, but maybe for a different reason than other people think. I think it's important because, especially at a certain point in your career, managing a social media account is not a good enough accomplishment. You need to have optimized something, saved money, made money, done awareness, something. And so if people don't respect you and are getting in your way, that actually has a detriment to your future, because what are you going to say at your next interview, what you did? That's a part that I think I underestimated and a lot of people do. And I actually kind of now work with my clients a little differently I do analytics. I'm in the data. And so I like to say I cut bullshit out because I'll be like, well, this yielded you nothing. And you know, data is also political. So meaning there's just some things, if it flops and it was the CEO's idea, we're still doing it because the CEO wants to do it. So it's not perfect. However, most times when you show an executive, this is what happened, this is what was yielded, this is what we do that is more on the target, and it saved you some money. That's you're like, okay, what can I do to cut that? Who's bothering you? So we can focus on you getting X done. So it's a little bit of, I like to flip it a little bit and think about where do my goals align with other people. So for some leaders, they like to be innovative. They like to think they're innovators, even if they're really not. So then I'm going to use language on how that could accomplish their goal. And if they have a boss that has tasked them with being innovative, say this idea from the social team is going to help you with that goal that you have from your boss. People love to help you if it's going to help their bonus. So I find out what is going to make that person give me what I want. And they don't even know it's what I want. I'm telling them what they need. Then, you know, I can just run and do what I need to do so I can get my next client, my next referral, or, you know, and when in-house, I think that's kind of how I decided to do this, was by accident. I was one of those people working for a public company, but I was a social media manager for an international company pretty much alone. There were layoffs, and there was the boss that was the PR person, and I was the social PR person, which meant I had the pleasure of doing traditional PR and social media and community management and blogging all at the same time, and customer service, because customer service refused to get on social media because they just wanted to answer the phone. So that was, yeah. You know, when you're 25, you don't know. You shouldn't be doing that. But I did it, and it was, you know, that's the other thing you have to say. A paid full-time job in social media at that time, at my age, it was the holy grail. And we didn't talk about the stuff we're talking about now of respect. The fact that I had a paying job as a millennial that wasn't a server was just like already like, hey, we're here. So you didn't want to complain because there was literally so many people lined up for your job. But with the layoffs, there was less time to do things. And so I was doing this press release. It was the most depressing press release in the world because it was not newsworthy. And I had to do one like every 2 to 3 days. And it required me. It required a copy editor to proof me. It required the director of PR. It required the CMO. All of these people's time for a non-newsworthy press release, but we had to do it so we would look good. So when things got laid off, there was literally less time. They're like, what task can we take? I raised that one. And so I worked with the demand generation because the argument was there's awareness building and we're getting leads from it. So I had him connect me to the lead place and we track everything. And I was able to see over the course of 2 years, we drove 2 leads with that press release, which was the most depressing report that I ever had to do to show how little impact I had. And what am I going to do with that on my resume? I wrote press releases. Did any of them place? No, they did not. Doesn't look good for me. So I need to cut that task. And so, of course, because I was 25 and did all this work, it was like, thank you. You still have to do it. But then they hired a firm to do the same work for tens of thousands of dollars to the same conclusion that I did. But it taught me like, okay, even though I wasn't respected at that moment for my next role, and I was talking about how I can be efficient and cut fat, I gave that example. So I turned that kind of loss of, okay, maybe she's not a good press release writer into, oh my goodness, she understands data and this can help us with X, Y, and Z. So that is that.
Amazing. No, that's amazing. So something that came to me, and we'll kind of venture off into our last question before we bring on all the guests and do a roundtable. Something I wrote down was, how would you say respect and burnout and maybe being taken advantage kind of work together, if at all? And the reason why I bring that up is you mentioned how you were, social media manager, also community manager, doing customer service, and And when I think about that, I think about a lot of the job descriptions that you see out there of people wanting 5 years experience for an entry-level job, or you see people complaining, or not complaining, but expressing their frustration about feeling burnt out. But at the same time, they want to get that respect. They want to show that they're a team player. So, what are your thoughts on that, and how would you kind of address it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things. I think a little bit is playing the game, and then the other is like setting expectations. So when I see, when I've seen some of those, descriptions, it was like Facebook ads, this, that, and the other. And so I come into the interview, we chat, I can tell they like me or whatever. I say, okay, so which of these am I actually doing? Because these are 4 jobs. And they were like, we actually only need you to do these 2. And I was like, great, thanks. We'll continue the conversation, because especially if I'm talking to the social media team, I'm like, I know that nobody is doing all of these things. And they just were more so. And that, it was a great conversation, because they're like, oh, other people do these things, but if they're sick, we want someone who could do these things as a backup. I'm like, okay, we're having a completely different conversation. I think the other is really the burnout is real. And I think, once again, it's really standing your ground. I remember my first vacation as a social media manager, and I was just like so burnt out. And I was in Florida, and the event manager is texting me about, can I post a picture with a caption? And I'm like, you have the login, you do it. And so she's just like, oh, well, I don't want to make a typo. So I was like, so don't. And it's just like, you all are, I don't like that part of like, you had to be able to have a writing sample to get in this job. It's literally a post nobody cares about like, hey, we're in Florida today, right? Hey, we're in Florida today. And I was reluctant. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have reception, can't do it. Whatever. And it got to the point where my boss was finally like, I will do it for Adrian. But it kind of set that thing like, no, I requested off for a week. I'm off for a week. And that's kind of what it is. But of course, once again, playing the game. I didn't start that. I was accommodating. I did this. So it's a little bit of strategy of, like I said before, playing to what other people care about. And then saying like, oh, if you want more of this, I can't be bogged down with that. And a lot of people will move those barriers out your way. And then the other is like setting boundaries. I took a honeymoon in a pandemic, so a honeymoon in my living room, but I needed a moment. And so I have 3 or 4 clients at that time. Not a single one bothered me, because they knew Adrian's on our honeymoon. And I gave a person's backup information, which was critical, because it was when Black Lives Matter was really, ramping up. And so I did check my email, because I was like, okay, they might need a little help on this. But fortunately, the person that I had as the backup, she was already like, we're taking down these posts, we're pausing. And I was like, great, that's what I would have done, going back to my honeymoon, type of thing. So it's a lot of different ways to get things done.
Awesome. That's absolutely amazing. So yeah, as you see, we brought in the rest of the guests from today. Again, thank you all so much for joining in. I think there's been a lot of great information shared, and we have a bunch of questions that have come into the chat. So we just wanted to pull that up for a little roundtable to end the night. And the first one we have, I'm going to bring it up on the screen. And this will be for anyone that wants to address it. Is there a way to move up without being a manager? Who would like to take that one?
I can hop in. I mentioned this a little earlier. Like, I'm very lucky that my new job doesn't require me to be a manager. I think the easiest way to do this is probably going to be moving. If we're being honest, it's probably moving to larger companies in similar roles to what you have. And I think this is a really tough conversation. Like, I think you see in pro sports social, people are like working in the subject matter, whether it's NBA, NFL, or whatever else. That is the most important on like their tier of needs career-wise. And if I were to tell someone in pro sports social who wants to go maybe seek more compensation or have more responsibility, that like maybe they should leave sports, I'd probably get glared at by a lot of them. So I think there's knowing your hierarchy of needs, like I think is really, really important. But I think it's going to be a lot of pursuing the same job at bigger companies that have wider pay ranges. I think it's a lot of when there's not a clear like next step for you. Like, so something I did at my first agency, and I'll let somebody else talk, sorry. But we didn't have senior strategists at Eisenberg. That was not a job that existed. And I've been a strategist for 3 years. So I put together an entire presentation for my boss that had 7 different senior strategist job descriptions. It had a pay scale that I created. I was like, this is what senior strategists get paid at different levels. Here's the middle. I'm asking you for the direct middle, which was still a good raise for me. Here's how I think I've already been doing this job, and here's what I think this job means in the future. And 2 weeks later, not only did I get that job, but 3 of my peers got that job description. It didn't even exist in the past. So I think some of it's create your own, some of it's look around and know what else is out there, and just constantly know your worth. Know what, like, talk to your friends about what they get paid. Like, have that honest talk so you can, like, we can talk about salary transparency that way.
Absolutely. And there was a follow-up to that. And Allie, if you want to jump in on this. So the user said, I feel like they reward high performance with management, but they're totally different gigs.
I mean, yes. So it just depends on what high performance is where you are, and what the metric is for success. Like when at Digitas, right, or at other agencies, a lot of what success looks like is winning new business. It's having a bigger team. It's like, okay, I won new business, so we have more money to hire more people. And that's like the sign of your success, right? And so what does that naturally mean? It means more people on your team and you need management. And so generally, the people who know the subject matter the best are put in the role to manage people. And honestly, like, I think we're at a place where that does have to change. When we're doing reviews, or when I'm doing a review of someone who's like a solid performer, who's doing really well, who's like an expert, but isn't showing that like interest in management, I don't dock them for that. Like, that's nothing that I think is a problem. It's just something to discuss with them, because it is true that in agency life, like, that one of the easiest ways or paths to success is to have a team. But I've also seen lots of people who've built careers on being like extreme experts in one space, right? Like, we have commerce experts at Digitas. We have there's one dude on our team who just like knows all the new emerging technology and is just super cool, and you can talk to him about anything, and they've carved that path out for themselves. So it's there. It's not as obvious.
Yeah.
Gotcha. That's absolutely great. And the next question that came in was, how much time would you recommend to allocate to personal branding? Open to the group here, anyone that wants to jump in on that.
Only as much as you want to. Like, if it's enjoyable for you, great. Like, there are some real career benefits to it. There are some real cons to it. But if it's not, you should never judge someone based on their social media, on their personal social. Some of the most talented people that I know, like, absolutely hate being on most of the social networks.
Yep.
I just keep repeating the same thing, like, as much as you want to.
Yeah, I'm not a big time for, like, I'm more about the quality and the impact than, oh, you should do an hour a day or anything. I think it's just, what is your goal? Because clearly, if you're trying to be like an influencer in the space, that's completely different than, say, you just want, a brand of being known for X. Come to your page, I see what you're about, but like, I'm not about to be doing 10 reels a day on social media. I'm posting every day a tip on Instagram. Like, I have a personal life, and that's not what I want. However, I do want to have some presence, so I'm not associated with any particular client or any particular job, because when that goes away, or if it goes away, I don't want to have to be out there like, oh, starting over, especially when you're stressed. Like, there's few things more stressful than when now you don't have a job. So I think if you do want to do personal branding, I recommend it doing while you're, having a paycheck, so you can be slightly less stressed. And really just figure out, like, what is your goal? Do you want to speak more? Do you want, more opportunities? And then kind of figure out what does that look like? Having nice pictures, a simple website, boom.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like, oh, I have a daily newsletter, like whatever works for you.
Yeah.
It's just like, do the things that give you energy, and that make you better. And for I think the people you're talking to here, like, we get energy from doing some of this stuff. And so it's why we do it as frequently as we do. But like, if that isn't what brings you energy, then do something else like that does, because I think so many people think of their off time from work as like time to recharge, when actually I think of it as time to charge. I don't know if that's different.
Yep.
But you get what I'm saying.
Yep.
I don't know. Is it different?
I'm totally there.
You're deep, Valley.
I think I've got one quick thing to add, which actually piggybacks off another question about how to move up without being a manager. I think the way that I view personal branding is just as a case study for myself, right? I think across the board, everyone here has done something outside of social that helped them develop skills to be a social manager, a social strategist, director. So I would view personal branding, and again, of course, like, put as much time into it as you feel comfortable, but also view it as a way to showcase skills you may not be able to at your job, skills that you want to improve in, or skills that you want to eventually become better at, right? Like, that's your opportunity to experiment and try new things and develop new skills. So I would look at it as that way, and that could eventually help you become, a manager without having to be a manager, because people recognize you for the skills that you developed yourself versus inside a 9-to-5.
Yeah. The last thing I would add on this topic, and like, this is where I'd slightly like twist the question. Like, a common question is, how much time would you recommend? I think, what is the most impact you're going to be able to offer that you're interested in offering? Like, we're all from like very similar social media worlds, as well as social media, Twitter, marketing, Twitter have all advanced and more of us are active. We're seeing a lot of the same types of conversations now. Like, I truly believe everyone has something that's really, truly unique that they can bring that no one else has thought of. That, like, whether you're on your first day of working in social, you've been doing this for 30 years, I think what's not as helpful is, like, for instance, like, the Capitol riots happen, and I go to my Twitter feed, and it's 70 different social media managers who are all tweeting, remember to turn off your ads. Like, to me, that's not personal branding. Right. That's a lot of us saying the same conversation. Like, don't start there. Start with, like, what is the thing that you personally are most interested in offering that's really unique to who you are.
Yeah, I think that's super important. I know, from my personal experience, not even looking at it as trying to build a personal brand. It was just more so for me, speaking personally, looking for kind of like a platform to speak my truth and speak to what I felt was important about my profession and the industry that I'm in. And I think when you look at it when you come from a place of passion, and not really looking at it as like another job, like, hey, I need a content strategy and I got to make sure I hit this topic today or something like that. You might find yourself building a personal brand and not even knowing it, and, I think the benefit from that and, kind of like a proof case is, you never know who you meet. You never know what opportunities come to you. You never know some of the skills that come out of you that, hey, shit, you had no idea you could, host a show, or you can start a Twitter chat or anything like that. So I would say don't focus on the time, just focus on your purpose and what you're passionate about talking about, for sure. And then I know we all have lives and want to get back to them very quickly, but the last thing that I personally want to bring up is there's been a lot of changes on social with the platforms and different things that have come around, from, Fleets to some other Clubhouse and things that Instagram is doing and things that Instagram are taking away and so on and so forth. So obviously every new update that comes, it impacts us as social professionals in one way or another. Either, our clients ask like, hey, can you have a strategy ready for this new thing tomorrow? Or, we're going back to drawing board and trying to figure out how we're going to, gain the attention of all the people that are on social. So what would you guys say, are some of your thoughts and how you're looking at, all these different updates that are coming to the forefront?
Man, this Facebook news ban is killing me right now. Like what I am thinking about in the back of my head with all, I mean, like these little changes that the platforms make are very substantial and super big, right? But these big regulatory like things are going to have probably a bigger impact on where social media is for our careers in the future. And I think like I am just almost amazed at some of the decisions and posturing that's happening between the platforms and almost the power that they have. Even though we talk about the power they have all the time to all of our clients. That's the biggest thing on my mind right now is just like how much power a network has on not just like what we read and think and do, but like what we even have access to.
Yeah, I agree with Allie because I think, for some of the latest updates and stuff, I'll be honest, I have not really seen all of them because I'm in data sometimes. But I will say the big things we're seeing are a lot of people or a lot of brands were very Facebook heavy, especially in the advertising space. And so some of my clients are in the not political space, but I guess the topics are political, like health information and that. And so Facebook and that really messed things up because that's their bread and butter. They have so much money and they dump it into Facebook. We get the return. It's kind of what it is. And so I think that really had people thinking, you guys can't be too Facebook heavy because what if, especially with this iOS, tracking change, maybe that, the shooting fish in a barrel thing's not going to work for you. So I'm seeing more people venture into other platforms and even saying, even if, Facebook ad things change, doesn't matter. We were too heavy anyway. And so really a diversification. So I'm looking Pinterest, other social networks that I traditionally hadn't for certain clients, because it just didn't fit. But now I'm also seeing different people. And I think with, I keep talking about Pinterest, that's the thing that I've looked at most recent. I think there was this filter thing, like for makeup, like you could test lipstick or something like that. And I was like, this is dope. And as everybody's kind of like fleeing, Instagram because they're annoyed with all the ads they're getting, I'm like, there's some really great opportunities out there as well.
And this is where I get excited because one of the reasons I wanted my current job is like I'm a big believer in influencers. And not only do I not think they're going away, like I think they're just going to keep accelerating. Like I love I'm obsessed with like branded content. Like the best branded content in the last year was The Last Dance. Yeah, it was a TV show about Jordan. It's the most effective thing that they've done. Like that's a great brand that does a lot of great things. So that's a space that I'm continually fascinated by is like, when are more brands going to start appearing on Netflix? Because they've made branded content that's entertainment worthy. Like I think that's going to be something we're going to see a lot more of.
Commerce is huge. Like that's all the platforms right now are scrambling to figure out how to make people buy on the platforms because they've realized that that's what advertisers want. And I'm scared about it.
Big time.
I'm scared about it. Like, because I already spend a shit ton of money from like the ads I get. Like the hashtag, what's it called? TikTok made me do it. Like that is real for me.
Yeah, it really is.
You guys. So I'm scared for myself personally and like how much money I will actually have because of the changes they're making.
It's crazy. I would say for me, like what I don't like about all these updates is how some platforms, and I'll just say it, Instagram, is just becoming way too cluttered in itself. So you have all these different features that are within the app, and I think when we all first got onto social, since we're all kind of like seasoned pros here, these platforms were super simple and you understood the value of it and you were able to connect with people. You were able to share your interests and your passions and your creativity. And especially Facebook and Instagram has really complicated that. And I think the reason why we're all really gravitating so much to TikTok is because it is very simple in its functionality. And then when you hear things about bringing in e-commerce and all that stuff, you start to get a little scared, not only because of your budgeting and your savings accounts, but also you're like, wait, like don't mess something up that's great already. Like your algorithm is fantastic. creators on there or from all walks of life. And this is what social media is. Don't turn into another Facebook, Instagram. Shout out to all my friends there. I love you guys anyways. They know how I feel, so I'm not. I'm
sure they're not surprised.
Yeah, they're not surprised at all. But I would really like to see simplicity become a common theme again. And I know it's going to be tough because everyone's competing with one another, stories, vertical videos, e-commerce, this, that, and the third. But I think simplicity wins the game on social.
Yeah. TikTok's done that super well. Like they're adding features and functions, but like I'm still just flicking my thumb and swiping up to the next thing. I still trust that the next video is going to entertain me as much as the last one. And that's not true of how I use other social networks.
Yeah.
It really isn't.
And it brings you happiness. Like you laugh a little bit. You know, you can actually get your mind off some things. Like I think that the pandemic has really shifted things, like with the e-commerce, you know, we're at home with, you know, we have too much screen time. Great. You can just hear people in Clubhouse. You don't want to see your crazy uncle having conspiracy theories on Facebook. So let's go to TikTok and see some happy videos, you know? And so what I hope is for some niche again, because what is it? Dispo or whatever. And so, you know, people had their thoughts on it, you know, which was a little, you know, it's a beta, so give them a minute. But what I was interested is the people on my timeline who are photographers were like, I love this and this is fun for me and blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, oh, wow. Like, what if we start having, you know, I know there's consolidation and things like that, but like things for people to have fun again and to like enjoy things. And it doesn't have to be for everybody, you know, and I know clearly you want everybody so you can make some more money, but then maybe you're getting really targeted audiences and you can charge more for the ads. I don't know, but my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, just to jump in as the last person here, I don't have too much more to add than what everyone else just said. I think everyone kind of summed it up very well. I mean, and the point that I would really harp on is just a take back to simplicity. I think several people on this panel have brought it up. And if there is to be something that comes next after TikTok, there probably will be. I think their ability to leverage nostalgia in a way that is simpler, right? That gives people more control and less noise is the best way to go. And I think that's what makes TikTok so special and so powerful, right? Like we've all mentioned, they're simple, they're easy, and they make us feel something pretty immediately.
Yeah,
so that's my take.
What was that other app that came out? Is it Triller?
Yeah.
They tried real hard. With Mike Tyson and that whole thing.
They tried.
I can't. They had Charlie go over there, Charlie D'Amelio. Like I just.
Yep. They tried. I mean, they gave a valiant effort, and I think they had their moment when TikTok was a little, but they came back stronger. So.
They were saying they were going to be the number one. I remember this, like when the TikTok ban was looming, they were like, we're going to be the number one app. And then it didn't happen. I was like,
nothing is guaranteed. No.
Awesome. Guys, well, listen, thank you so much for taking the time. I know that there'll be tremendous value taken away from this discussion. And we'll definitely put up the replay on Twitter and everywhere else. And really appreciate your guys' time. And thank you so much for coming down tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
All right. Have a good night, guys.
Yep.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.